everyone, AMR back again with another top 5. So in today's episode, we're going to be doing wide receivers. So as we get closer and closer to the NFL season, you know that these guys are going to be making or breaking your rosters. And here is all the information that you need to know for the top 5 guys that I personally think are going to be the biggest impactors for the NFL season. So I'm going to have a lot of people probably going, what the hell are you thinking about as my number 1 pick? But keep in mind that I have plenty of justification going into this, strength of schedule, other outside factors, age. There's a bunch of stuff going on. So keep that with a grain of salt, but if you like the content, feel free to give it a like. If not, I don't really care. Let's go ahead and jump right into it. So first off here, you have Mike Evans. So his team is currently projected to win the NFC South. It should be a pretty fun division, honestly. You have Atlanta rebuilding, you have New Orleans rebuilding, you have Carolina rebuilding, and then you have Tampa, who's just built. Like, they're super strong. They're currently set to win 11 games this season, probably more in my personal opinion. And Chris Godwin is going to be not on the team, but Chris Godwin will be injured for the majority of the season, most likely. Gronk is not returning. Antonio Brown is not going to be there. You still have Bruce Arians, so you know that it's going to be a very similar offensive scheme. Going on to that next point here, it's probably the biggest one that we need to talk about, and it's that Godwin is going to be out likely the majority of the season. I think it was week 13 or 14 last season, Chris Godwin ended up tearing his ACL. That is a huge injury for a wide receiver. It's typically a 9 to 12 month recovery. And so Chris Godwin will likely be out through week 7, possibly 10 for the NFL season. And honestly, Mike Evans has excelled tremendously in the absence of Chris Godwin. In games where Mike Evans does not have Chris Godwin on the field, he has caught 34 passes for 458 yards, 7 touchdowns in just 6 games. So Mike Evans is clearly capable of surpassing any type of bounds that were set between Tom Brady, Chris Godwin, and Mike Evans. Next up here, we have the fact that he'll be serving as the main target for this receiving core. With Gronk not returning, you have Cameron Brate, who's more of a blocking tight end than a pass catching one. You did have Leonard Fournette, who had quite a good season last season. So he'll be taking a couple of receptions a game away, but nothing that Mike Evans will really even notice. So Mike Evans is probably one of the most prolific wide receivers in the NFL that currently is playing, because he has surpassed 1,000 yards in every single of his 8 seasons in the NFL, which is crazy to think about. Back when Jameis Winston was his quarterback, that he was still able to get over 1,000 yards. That's incredible to me. And he's definitely been bitten by the injury bug quite a few times in his career. He struggled getting with his hamstring healthy. He's gotten in trouble on the field a couple of times, getting into like scuffles and stuff. So he's definitely one of those people that will not necessarily be a hindrance on your team, but more of a sure-handed 1,000 yards. So number 5 here, he scored 14 touchdowns with a crowded receiving room last year. So now that there's not a bunch of mouths to feed for the receiving core, I really think that we could start to see Mike Evans really shine with Tom Brady. He has the opportunity to be that number 1 that we all know and love. And so Tom Brady and Mike Evans could be a name or combination rather that we'll hear quite often this season. And for our last point here, he played 82% of snaps last season, only dropping 1.8% of those. So if the ball's hitting Mike Evans in the hand, if the ball's going to hit Mike Evans in the hands, he's definitely going to end up catching the football. So getting a sure-handed wide receiver on your team could be the difference between a win and a loss going into later half playoff types of the season. Next up, we have Keenan Allen. So Keenan Allen's one of those sneaky wide receivers where a lot of people don't necessarily know if he's going to be a top 10 wide receiver. I personally think that Justin Herbert is finally catching his groove in Los Angeles. I think that he could end up having one of the best runs at a quarterback in the most recent. I think that Justin Herbert is about to have one of the best quarterback seasons that we've ever seen. I think that him and Keenan Allen are going to be hooking up quite a bit this season. And so let's go ahead and jump down this list here. They're in a tough division, so you know they're going to have to score a lot in order to stay relevant. They have an overpowered Denver Broncos team. They have an overpowered Vegas team. You have a somewhat powered Kansas City team, but definitely don't ever count them out. So it's going to take a lot for the Chargers to score and it's going to take a lot for the Chargers to score and remain relevant throughout the entire part of the season. So second up here, he steadily hovers right around 1,100 yards per season. He's one of those guys, just like Mike Evans, where you just kind of place it and forget it. He's going to be very, very reliable. He's going to be very reliable for you throughout the entire year. He averages, based on that, jumping ahead at that fourth bullet point, he averages right around 6 to 8 touchdowns per season. He's super reliable. He's one of those guys that if he does get injured, he comes back and it's like he picked up right where he left off. He's super good. He's never missed an entire season. He's one of those guys that will miss maybe 2-3 games a season. Very normal. And then for that third bullet point, like I talked about earlier, him and Justin Herbert are finally getting that established chemistry that really takes an average wide receiver and quarterback to the next level. So for that fifth bullet point, he's been able to stay healthy. I talked about it a little bit earlier, but he's definitely one of those players that will miss 2 to 3 games a season. However, that being said, he always comes back better than when he left off. He's a sure-handed wide receiver who has his nose on getting that 1,000+ yard season, and he plays 86% of snaps, only dropping 5.1% of the passes thrown his way. Justin Herbert is a very accurate quarterback, and I feel like the only reason that Keenan Allen would ever drop a pass from Justin Herbert would be because Justin Herbert threw it a little bit too hard. It happens. Justin Herbert's got a cannon, and that's just something that receivers have to deal with. But Keenan Allen could be that guy that could take your team to the next level. This should come as no surprise, but Jamar Chase kind of took the world by storm last season. He was, without a doubt, the rookie of the year. He had taken the Bengals from that 8 to 10 win team to sure-handed going all the way to the Super Bowl. Between Joe Burrow heating up and Jamar Chase just completely dominating every corner that tried to guard him, this team was untouchable until it got to the Super Bowl, and then they got touched. But so for our first bullet point here, they have a title contending team with eyes set on going back to the Super Bowl. I think that's super important because when you have a team that is all around the same mindset of we want to win and we want to win by a lot, then that just translates so much to overall effort on the field, whether or not you're getting opportunities in the game, and then overall how much you are able to score in those contests. For our second bullet point here, he's coming off of the best wide receiver rookie season that we've ever seen. He was untouchable last season. Even without the extra game last season, I think that he still has the best wide receiver rookie season we've ever seen. Jamar Chase was on a different level last season. He was jogging and getting away from people last season. He just looks so fluent when he's running that it's just so crazy and fun to watch. For that third bullet point here, we have that he has that established connection with Joe Burrow, one that we saw at LSU. Joe Burrow made all of the effort to say to the head office, hey, this is my guy, go after him. And they did it, and man, did it ever pay off. I mean, this is going to be one of those connections that we talk about. It's going to be like the Brady and Edelman, the Brady and Welker, Brady and Gronk. I feel like this is going to be the Burrow and Chase of futures present, of years to come. So for that fourth bullet point, he's just got a nose for the end zone. He's one of those wide receivers that will do anything it takes to get into the end zone. And he's just naturally gifted to figure out the weak points in the defense, get open, and then just make whatever moves he has to get rid of the defenders. And he just has a nose for scoring. He's so freaking good. For that fifth bullet point, he's got a 1-2 punch with T. Higgins. T. Higgins, also a former teammate over at LSU. T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, not one of them ever has to dominate the other one. So he has a 1-2 punch here with T. Higgins, a former teammate over at LSU. He's one of those guys that he doesn't necessarily need to consume all of the targets in order for both of them to succeed. T. Higgins and Jamar Chase actually have a lot of games where they both succeed and the team actually excels to whatever level that they want to take it to. Joe Burrow, from week 15 and on, was playing out of his mind. He had one game where he had over 500 yards passing. I feel like this is just going to be a prequel to what we're going to see in this season. Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, all three of those guys are going to be super relevant for fantasy, super relevant for how the NFL shakes out. And I'm really excited to watch this team develop into the championship team, at what they'll end up being. For that last point here, Jamar Chase finished last season with 1,455 yards, 13 touchdowns, and an 85% snap count. He was on a different playing field, and I think that numbers don't lie here. For number 2 on this list, we have Justin Jefferson. So Justin Jefferson was, I think, like 13 or 16 yards away from breaking Randy Moss's single season receiving record with the Minnesota Vikings. I was actually at the game where he was going to end up breaking the record, but Mike Zimmer decided to knee out the clock instead. So that's always cool. And look what he's doing now. He has no job. So Justin Jefferson's one of those guys who he's on a team that's going to be contending. He's on a team where he is the main focal point, and he's on a team where they really solely rely on him to get as many yards as possible. So he has a nose for the end zone. That's really no shocker to anyone. In games where Adam Thielen missed due to injury, Justin Jefferson certainly rose to the occasion. Even in games where Adam Thielen was on the field, it seemed like Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen were both getting large pieces of the pie. So for number 3, Kirk Cousins always looks at Justin Jefferson as the first read. Whether or not he gets it to him is a different question, but Kirk Cousins actually had his most precise season last season. So I think that all signs are pointing to Justin Jefferson having as good, if not better, of a season here in the next season. So for our fourth bullet point, it clearly seems like Adam Thielen might have lost a step. Like, let's be honest, he's no spring chicken anymore. He's definitely getting up there in age. Adam Thielen presents something that most wide receivers don't have, and that's sure-handedness. Like, whenever the team needs that third down reception, they typically target Adam Thielen because he's so sure-handed. He's really good at route running as well, and I think that opens up a lot of opportunity for Justin Jefferson down the field. And so, like I said, Kirk Cousins having Justin Jefferson as that first read, you're definitely going to see a lot of those long ball shots. And let's be honest, we all love watching Justin Jefferson do the gritty on national television. For number 5 here, the team needs him in order to succeed. I talked about it a lot before, but outside of Justin Jefferson, they really only have Dalvin Cook, Adam Thielen, Irv Smith, and Kirk Cousins. So with those 5 being in mind, 3 of which kind of are very injury prone. So we have to be very cautious. And Justin Jefferson just seems like that knight in shining armor. Looking here at the bottom point here, he had 1,616 yards, 10 touchdowns, and only 4.2% of drop passes. So he's a very sure-handed wide receiver who can get into the end zone and also just racks up all of those yards throughout the season. Now we come to what is probably going to shock everyone on the face of the earth, but I personally believe that Cortland Sutton is going to be the number 1 fantasy wide receiver this upcoming season. Cortland Sutton has all the right things going for him as long as he can stay healthy. So Russell Wilson is finally on a team that is ready to air the ball out. He was stuck on Seattle, which was definitely a run-first team, and they had to wait and have Russell Wilson bail them out when they noticed that the run first wasn't happening anymore, or wasn't working, I should say. So him being on a team like Denver, who pretty much has a jam-packed wide receiver core, and they are looking to pass the football. Unfortunately, they've been really struggling to find a quarterback that fits that dynamic. They had Case Keenum, Joe Flacco, Drew Lock, Teddy Bridgewater. None of those guys even... You could take all those guys, combine them into one person, and they're still not as good as Russell Wilson. So Russell Wilson is going to be the guy that actually catapults this team to the next level. Whether it be Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton, or Tim Patrick, I really think that Cortland Sutton is going to be the main benefactor, but all of those guys are probably going to end up right around 1,000 yards, if not more. And I really think that Cortland Sutton is going to be closer to like that 1,500, 1,700 mark. It's kind of crazy to think about, but that's honestly what I see. Last season, he played 85% of the snaps. Last season, he played 85% of the snaps, which was very good for a guy who missed the majority of his 2020 season due to an injury. So for those of you that don't know, Cortland Sutton is one of the bigger bodies at the wide receiver position. He's extremely cut. Like, he is very well defined. He's a strong wide receiver who's got some height to him, and he is very good at getting separation. He's one of those guys that a lot of people just let fly under the radar as not being a premier wide receiver, and that's mostly because he doesn't have anyone throwing him with the football. He finally does have that now, and I really think that you're going to see a different Cortland Sutton take over. Last season, he had 98 receptions, but only 58 of them. So I actually have a typo here, but last season he had 98 targets and 58 receptions, but only dropping 3.1% of those. So that means that of those 58 receptions and the 40 that went errant, only 3.1 of them are drops. So that was a lot of just clear misses that he was having. That's a lot of yards left on the field. So if you think about just the average wide receiver that Russell Wilson supports, a Tyler Lockett, very fantasy relevant, a DK Metcalf, very fantasy relevant. Now you're going to have Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton taking on those roles, except Russell Wilson will no longer be hindered to a run-first team. So I think it's really important to understand like all the things moving here. And then for that fourth bullet point, he averages 13.4 yards per reception. He's one guy that can get you a first down immediately and then some. He hasn't had a quarterback that really can be that threat. I'm just going to keep beating that dead horse here. No pun intended, considering that's the Broncos. But this team is going to be passing the football and passing the football often. He is the deep threat for the team. That's been no question, no way around it. Like Jerry Jeudy is that smooth as silk type of route runner that gets like those third down receptions, whatever, and what have you. Tim Patrick is kind of like that in-between guy when the first and second looks aren't there. Tim Patrick's that sure-handed third guy. And then you have Cortland Sutton, who's usually downfield, and then they don't have a quarterback who can get into to him. So I really think that Russell Wilson, who is a very accurate deep passer, will be connecting with Cortland Sutton more often than not. And then for our last point there, I've already talked about it a little bit, but he's elusive, he is talented, and he is a very big-bodied wide receiver. That, to me, is like a DK Metcalf equivalent here. Obviously, DK Metcalf is faster and more built, but that being said, I feel like Cortland Sutton kind of has a little bit more elusiveness than DK Metcalf. DK Metcalf is a little bit too bulky, whereas Cortland Sutton is kind of like that perfection between the two. But I know that I'm going to get a lot of slack on this, saying like, oh my God, how is Stefon Diggs not on here? How is Cooper Kupp not on here? How is Devontae Adams not on here? To be honest, there's a lot of things that go into account here. To be honest, there's a lot of things that are going on here that could be playing into a factor. Strength of schedule is obviously one of them. Like other types of conditions goes into it as well. But all things being considered here, this list is based on too many variables to sit here and explain every single one. Cooper Kupp has the hardest schedule of any wide receiver this season. You can look it up. The Los Angeles Rams have the toughest schedule this season. So Cooper Kupp repeating, as well as adding on Allen Robinson as another guy who's just going to be sucking away all those targets and stuff, it's just unlikely that he'll repeat. He's also gotten a year older. He's not a very young guy. I think he's like 29, 30, 31. He's right around that age. So I think that he's definitely going to be a good wide receiver. I just don't know if he's going to be what he was last season. So we might want to go ahead and temper our expectations there. And as far as Devontae Adams goes, he's in a very crowded room. He's got Josh Jacobs in the backfield. He's got Darren Waller, and he's also got Hunter Renfrow. That team is starting to take really good shape, but I'm not a sure-handed believer in Derek Carr as a quarterback. And for that reason alone, I'm just kind of like weary on the whole thought behind it. And then Stefon Diggs, I get it. I think that Stefon Diggs is probably a top 5 wide receiver in the NFL, but I don't necessarily believe in him repeating what he's done in years past, with Gabe Davis kind of being that rising talent on that team now. So outside of Stefon Diggs, you now have Gabriel Davis, you have Dawson Knox, you have Josh Allen, who is a threat on the ground, you have Devin Singletary, you have James Cook, you have so many different things that are all just kind of accumulating, and it's just a lot of mouths to feed. So I believe in Josh Allen, I believe in Stefon Diggs, but in terms of best 5 wide receivers for this season, this is why this list got to where it was. So I hope you like it. Go ahead and let me know how much you hate this list or how much you like it, what we agree on, but I'll catch you in the next one. See ya!